Imagine waking up one day to discover that your entire life, your identity, everything you thought you knew about yourself might be a lie. Now picture this. There's someone out there who looks exactly like you, shares your name, and might even have a connection to you that defies all logic. Sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, right? But what if I told you this isn't fiction? What if I told you this is a real-life mystery that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family, identity, and the very fabric of who we are? Welcome to a story so unbelievable, so gripping, that once you start watching, you won't be able to look away. This is the tale of two women, one DNA test, and a truth so shocking it left them, and everyone who heard about it completely speechless. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to get answers to questions you didn't even know you had. And trust me, you're going to want to see this through to the very end. Now, let's talk about you for a second. Yes, you. Why are you here? What made you click on this video? Was it the mystery? The intrigue? The possibility of uncovering a truth so wild it could change the way you see the world? Whatever it was, I'm glad you're here, because this story isn't just about these two women. It's about all of us. It's about the questions we all have, about who we are, where we come from, and the secrets that might be hiding in our own DNA. And let's be real, who doesn't love a good mystery? Especially one that's real, raw, and unraveling right before our eyes. So, grab a seat, get comfortable, and let's dive into a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat from start to finish. Meet Sarah. Well, actually, meet two Sarahs. Sarah Johnson, a 34-year-old graphic designer from Chicago, and Sarah Johnson, a 34-year-old teacher from Seattle. Two women living completely separate lives with no reason to ever cross paths. But here's where it gets weird. They don't just share the same name, they look identical. Like, identical. Same hair, same eyes, same smile. If you saw them side by side, you'd swear they were twins. But here's the kicker, they're not related. At least, that's what they thought. Until one day, Sarah from Chicago decided to take a DNA test. You know, one of those ancestry kits that everyone's been talking about. She thought it would be fun to learn a little more about her family history, maybe discover some distant relatives she never knew about. What she got instead was a result so baffling, so impossible, that it turned her world upside down. The test said she had a sister, a full sister, not a half-sister, not a cousin, but a sister who shared both of her parents. The problem? Sarah was an only child, or so she thought. Confused and a little freaked out, she reached out to the DNA testing company, thinking there must have been some kind of mistake. But the company insisted the results were accurate. So, Sarah did the only thing she could think of. She reached out to the sister she never knew she had. And that's when she discovered Sarah from Seattle, the woman who looked exactly like her, the woman who shared her name, the woman who, according to the DNA test, was her sister. But how? How could two women, born to different parents, in different parts of the country, with no known connection, be sisters? And why did they look so alike? The questions were endless, and the answers were nowhere to be found. But here's the thing, this isn't just a story about a DNA test gone wrong. It's a story about identity, about family, about the secrets that can lie hidden in our past. It's a story that will make you question everything you think you know about yourself and the people around you. And it's a story that will leave you wondering, what would you do if you were in their shoes? How far would you go to uncover the truth? Because that's exactly what these two Sarahs did. They embarked on a journey to find answers, a journey that would take them deep into their past, into the lives of their parents, and into a web of secrets so tangled it would take everything they had to unravel it. As we dive deeper into this story, I want you to think about your own life. Think about the stories you've been told about your family, about where you come from. Are they all true? Or could there be secrets hiding in your own DNA, waiting to be uncovered? Because that's the thing about DNA, it doesn't lie. It tells the truth, even when that truth is hard to hear. And for these two Sarahs, the truth was about to change everything. But before we get to the truth, let's talk about the journey. Because this isn't just a story about a DNA test, it's a story about two women who refused to let the mystery go unsolved. It's a story about courage, about determination, about the lengths we'll go to for the people we love. And it's a story that will keep you guessing until the very end. Because just when you think you've figured it out, just when you think you know what's going on, something happens that turns everything on its head. And that's where we're going to leave it for now. Because the truth is even more shocking than you can imagine. But you're going to have to wait to find out what it is. So stay tuned, because this is one story you won't want to miss. As the two Sarahs began to piece together the fragments of their lives, they realized that their connection was far more complicated than they could have ever imagined. Sarah from Chicago, let's call her Sarah A.E., grew up in a loving household with her parents, who had always been open about her adoption. They had told her from a young age that she was chosen, that she was special, and that they loved her more than anything in the world. But they had never given her many details about her birth parents, only that they were young and unable to care for her at the time. Sarah A. had always been curious about her biological roots, but she never felt an urgent need to dig deeper until now. On the other hand, Sarah from Seattle, Sarah B., had grown up believing she was the biological child of her parents. She had never questioned her origins, never felt the need to. Her life was normal, uneventful, until the day she received a message from Sarah A. that turned her world upside down. The first time they spoke, it was awkward, to say the least. How do you even begin a conversation with someone who looks exactly like you, shares your name, and might be your sister? They started with the basics, comparing their lives, their families, their childhoods. They quickly realized that their similarities went far beyond their appearances. They both had a love for art, a fear of heights, and a habit of biting their nails when they were nervous. They even shared the same favorite childhood book, Charlotte's Web. It was eerie, almost surreal, and it left them both wondering, how could two people who had never met be so alike? But as they dug deeper, the differences began to surface. Sarah A. had been raised in the Midwest, in a small suburban town, while Sarah B. had grown up on the West Coast, in a bustling city. Their parents were different, their childhoods were different, and yet their DNA said they were sisters. As they began to investigate, they uncovered a series of strange coincidences that only deepened the mystery. Both Sarahs had been born in the same year, just a few months apart. Both had been adopted through private agencies, though in different states. And both had been told that their birth parents were young and unable to care for them. But here's where things got really strange. When they started looking into the adoption records, they hit a wall. The agencies they had been adopted through no longer existed, and the records were either lost or sealed. It was as if someone had gone to great lengths to make sure their pasts remained hidden. But why? What were they trying to hide? And who were they protecting? The more they searched, the more questions they had, and the more they realized that their connection was part of something much bigger than they had initially thought. Meanwhile, Sarah A.'s adoptive parents began to act strangely. They had always been supportive of her curiosity about her birth parents. But now, whenever she brought up the DNA test or Sarah B., they became evasive, almost nervous. They would change the subject, make excuses, or even leave the room. It was as if they were hiding something they didn't want her to know. Sarah A. couldn't shake the feeling that they were keeping a secret that might hold the key to the mystery. But how could she confront them without hurting the people who had raised her, who had loved her unconditionally? It was a delicate balance, one that left her torn between her desire for the truth and her loyalty to her family. On the other side of the country, Sarah B. was facing her own set of challenges. Her parents, who had always been open and honest with her, were now acting just as strangely as Sarah as. When she asked them about the DNA test, they brushed it off, saying it must be a mistake. But Sarah B. could tell they were hiding something. She could see it in their eyes, hear it in their voices. They were scared, though she couldn't understand why. What were they afraid of? And why were they so determined to keep her from finding out the truth? As she pressed them for answers, she began to notice small details she had never paid attention to before, like the fact that her birth certificate had been amended, or that her parents had moved across the country shortly after her adoption. It was as if they had been running from something or someone all along. As the two Sarahs continued to investigate, they began to uncover a web of secrets that stretched far beyond their own lives. They discovered that they weren't the only ones with mysterious pasts. There were others, other adoptees who had taken DNA tests and found unexpected connections, other families who had been torn apart by secrets and lies. It was as if they had stumbled into a hidden world, a world where nothing was as it seemed, and where the truth was buried deep beneath layers of deception. They began to wonder, were they part of some kind of experiment? Had they been part of a secret program, one that had been hidden from the public for decades? Or was there something even more sinister at play? The more they learned, the more they realized that they couldn't trust anyone, not their parents, not the adoption agencies, not even each other. Because the truth was, they didn't really know each other. They had only just met, and yet, their lives were intertwined in ways they couldn't fully understand. They began to question everything: their memories, their identities, even their own sanity. Was it possible that they had been manipulated, that their lives had been carefully constructed to keep them from discovering the truth? And if so, who was behind it? Who had the power to orchestrate something so elaborate, so insidious? The questions were endless, and the answers were nowhere to be found. But as they delved deeper into the mystery, they began to uncover clues that pointed to a larger conspiracy. They found records of a secretive organization that had been operating in the shadows for decades, an organization that had been involved in illegal adoptions, genetic experiments, and even human trafficking. It was a chilling discovery, one that left them both terrified and determined to uncover the truth. They knew they were getting closer to the heart of the mystery, but they also knew that they were putting themselves in danger. Because the people behind this conspiracy would stop at nothing to protect their secrets, even if it meant silencing anyone who got too close. As the tension continued to build, the two Sarahs found themselves at a crossroads. They could either walk away, go back to their lives, and pretend none of this had ever happened, or they could keep digging, keep searching for the truth, no matter the cost. It was a decision that would change their lives forever, one that would force them to confront their deepest fears and question everything they thought they knew about themselves and the world around them. But one thing was certain: they couldn't do it alone. They needed each other, now more than ever. Because the truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. And they were the only ones who could find it. But as they prepared to take the next step, to dive even deeper into the mystery, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. That someone, somewhere, was always one step ahead of them. And as they looked over their shoulders, wondering who they could trust, they realized that the truth might be even more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes, it destroys everything you thought you knew. And sometimes, it leaves you with more questions than answers. But one thing was certain: they were about to find out just how far they were willing to go for the truth. And so, the journey continued, into the unknown, into the darkness, into a mystery that would change their lives forever. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the truth was closer than they thought. And it was about to blow their minds. As the two Sarahs dug deeper into the mystery, the stakes grew higher, and the danger became more palpable. They began to notice strange occurrences, mysterious cars parked outside their homes, phone calls with no one on the other end, and even a break-in at Sarah A's apartment where nothing was stolen but her laptop had been tampered with. It was clear that someone didn't want them to uncover the truth, and that someone was willing to go to great lengths to stop them. The pressure was mounting, and the weight of the unknown was starting to take its toll. Sarah found herself lying awake at night, her mind racing with questions and fears, while Sarah B began to second-guess every decision she made, wondering if she was putting herself and her family in danger. But despite the growing sense of unease, they couldn't stop. They were too close now, too invested in uncovering the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. Their investigation led them to a small town in the Midwest, a place that seemed ordinary on the surface, but held secrets that would change everything. It was here that they discovered an old abandoned clinic that had once been at the center of a controversial medical program. The clinic had been shut down decades ago, but the rumors surrounding it were still alive. Whispers of illegal experiments, unethical practices, and children who had gone missing without a trace. As they walked through the crumbling building, they found files old, dusty, and barely legible that hinted at something far more sinister than they had ever imagined. The files mentioned a project codenamed Echo, a secret initiative that had been funded by a shadowy organization with ties to powerful figures in government and industry. The goal of the project was unclear, but one thing was certain: it involved genetic manipulation, and it had been conducted on children. The discovery sent chills down their spines. Could they have been part of this project? Was that why they looked identical, why their DNA matched so perfectly? The thought was almost too much to bear, but they couldn't ignore the evidence staring them in the face. As they sifted through the files, they found something that made their blood run cold: a photograph of a group of children, all around the same age, all with striking similarities. And there, in the center of the photo, were two little girls who looked exactly like them. It was undeniable proof that they were connected to this project, that their lives had been shaped by forces they couldn't even begin to understand. But who were the other children in the photo? Where were they now? And what had been done to them? As they tried to process the enormity of what they had found, they received a message from an anonymous source. The message was cryptic, warning them to stop digging, to leave the past alone if they valued their lives. But it also contained a clue, a name: Dr. Evelyn Hart. The name meant nothing to them at first, but a quick search revealed that Dr. Hart had been one of the lead scientists involved in Project Echo. She had disappeared shortly after the project was shut down, and no one had heard from her since. The Sarahs knew they had to find her, that she might be the key to unlocking the truth. But finding someone who didn't want to be found was easier said than done, especially when they were being watched at every turn. Meanwhile, the tension between the two Sarahs began to grow. The stress of the investigation, the constant fear of being discovered, and the weight of the secrets they were uncovering was starting to strain their relationship. Sarah wanted to push forward, to leave no stone unturned, no matter the risk. But Sarah B was starting to have doubts. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were in over their heads, that they were playing a dangerous game they couldn't possibly win. She began to wonder if the truth was worth the cost, if it was worth risking everything: their safety, their families, even their lives. But Sarah A was relentless, driven by a need to know, to understand, to finally have answers. And so, they pressed on, even as the danger grew more intense. Their search for Dr. Hart led them to a remote cabin in the woods, a place so isolated it felt like stepping into another world. The cabin was old and weathered, with a sense of abandonment that sent a shiver down their spines. But as they approached, they noticed signs of life: fresh tire tracks in the dirt, a faint light in the window, the smell of smoke from the chimney. Someone was here, and they had a feeling it was the person they had been searching for. But as they stepped inside, they were met with a sight that left them speechless. Sitting in a chair by the fire was an elderly woman, her face lined with age, but her eyes sharp and piercing. She looked at them with a mixture of sadness and resignation, as if she had been expecting them all along. "I knew you'd come," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I've been waiting for you." The woman introduced herself as Dr. Evelyn Hart, and as she began to speak, the Sarahs realized that the truth was far more shocking than they had ever imagined. Dr. Hart revealed that Project Echo had been an attempt to create genetically identical individuals, not just in appearance, but in every way: personality, talents, even memories. The goal was to study the nature of identity, to see if it was possible to replicate a person entirely. But the project had gone horribly wrong, and the children involved had been subjected to unimaginable experiments, their lives forever altered by the choices of those who saw them as nothing more than test subjects. Dr. Hart had tried to stop it, to expose the truth, but she had been silenced, forced into hiding to protect herself and the few children she had managed to save. As the Sarahs listened, their minds reeled with the implications. They weren't just sisters, they were clones, created in a lab, their lives predetermined by the whims of scientists who saw them as nothing more than experiments. It was a truth so devastating, so incomprehensible, that it left them both numb. But Dr. Hart wasn't finished. She told them that they weren't the only ones, that there were others out there, others like them, living lives they didn't know were built on lies. And she warned them that the people behind Project Echo were still out there, still watching, still waiting to silence anyone who threatened to expose their secrets. The revelation was a turning point, a moment that changed everything. The Sarahs knew they couldn't turn back now, that they had to see this through to the end, no matter the cost. But they also knew that they were walking into a fight they might not survive. The stakes had never been higher, the danger never more real. And as they left the cabin, the weight of the truth heavy on their shoulders, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that someone was always one step ahead. But they were determined to uncover the full story, to expose the lies, and to finally understand who they really were, because the truth was out there, waiting for them. And they were ready to face it, no matter what it took. But little did they know, the biggest twist was yet to come, a twist that would change everything they thought they knew about themselves, their past, and the world around them. And when it came, it would leave them questioning everything, even their own existence. As the two Sarahs left Dr. Hart's cabin, the weight of her revelations hung heavy in the air. They were clones, created in a lab, their lives shaped by a secretive and unethical project that had been buried for decades. The truth was staggering, but it also gave them a sense of clarity they had never felt before. They finally understood why they looked identical, why their DNA matched, and why their lives had been so eerily similar. But understanding the truth was only the beginning. Now, they had to decide what to do with it. Dr. Hart had warned them that the people behind Project Echo were still out there, still powerful, and still dangerous. If they wanted to expose the truth, they would have to be careful, and they would have to be prepared for the consequences. The Sarahs knew they couldn't do this alone. They needed help, someone who could guide them through the next steps and protect them from the forces that wanted to silence them. That's when they remembered the anonymous message they had received earlier, the one that had led them to Dr. Hart. Whoever had sent that message knew more than they were letting on, and the Sarahs had a feeling that person might be their only ally in this fight. Using the clues from the message, they managed to track down the sender, a former journalist named Marcus Reed, who had been investigating Project Echo for years. Marcus had been close to exposing the truth when he was forced into hiding, his career destroyed, and his life threatened. But he had never given up, and when he heard about the two Sarahs, he knew they were the key to finally bringing the project into the light. With Marcus's help, the Sarahs began to piece together the full story of Project Echo. They uncovered documents, testimonies, and evidence that painted a chilling picture of a program that had exploited innocent children in the name of science. They learned that the project had been funded by a powerful conglomerate with ties to governments and corporations around the world, and that the people behind it had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. As they dug deeper, they found evidence that Project Echo hadn't been shut down. It had simply gone underground. The program was still active, still experimenting and still creating clones. The Sarahs weren't just uncovering the past, they were exposing a present-day conspiracy that threatened countless lives. The revelation was a turning point. They knew they couldn't just expose the truth they had to stop the project for good. But taking on a powerful and secretive organization was no small task. They would need evidence, allies, and a plan. With Marcus's guidance, they began to gather everything they could: documents, recordings, and even testimonies from others who'd been affected by the project. They reached out to the other clones they had discovered, building a network of people who were ready to fight back. It wasn't easy. Every step forward came with risks, and every new piece of evidence brought them closer to danger. But they were determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The climax came when they managed to infiltrate a secret facility where the project was still being conducted. It was a high-stakes mission, fraught with tension and danger. They had to navigate security systems, avoid detection, and gather as much evidence as they could before they were caught. The facility was a labyrinth of labs, offices, and holding cells, each one more chilling than the last. They found rooms filled with equipment, files detailing ongoing experiments, and even cells where clones were being kept, some of them children, their faces eerily familiar. It was a horrifying sight, one that left them shaken, but more determined than ever to put an end to the project.